I will welcome everyone once again to the Long Overdue, a show about libraries, where each episode I will bring a special guest where we talk about the Sul Ross Library and beyond. Today with me, I have Dr. Kathy Stein, Director of the Academic Center for Excellence. She has been at Sul Ross for 14 years now as a professor and director. She is also the director of the Sul Ross Honors Club, and she was also a previously visiting professor at UTEP and also served as director of the Tutoring and Learning Center for UTEP. Welcome, Dr. Stein. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So this is the Long Overdue, as I was mentioning to you before. It's a great podcast. Wasn't started by me, actually. It was started by one of our previous librarians. Her name was Jocelyn Sandlin. And she asked me to be her co-host. But since Jocelyn moved on to greener pastures, mantle fell upon me. So it's great to have you on the show. Do you have anything else you want to add to what I just said about yourself? Anything you'd like our audience to know?
Nope, that about covers it.
All right, well then let's get started. Dr. Stein, what do libraries mean to you?
I love libraries, and I'm sure that that's how most of your guests respond. But I just love books. I've tried using Kindles, and I realize that they're part of any that the virtual books are just as important now as the paper books. But I've tried Kindles, and I love turning pages. And so in the classroom, like when sometimes I'll look at students and I go, get off your phones, and they're going, but that's where my text is. And I'm just going, how in the world are you looking at the book on your phone? Because the text is so small. But that's where our students are now. That's not how I am printed as a reader. I am printed on turning those pages, and there's just something that I really love about that. So I love going to libraries and just seeing all of those pages just waiting to be turned, and that's what I love about libraries. It's just all of those opportunities that are awaiting as soon as I have time to be going through the stacks and pulling them out.
No, and I agree completely. I can't do Kindle myself. There's no better feeling than turning the pages of a book, holding that book, feeling when you're really immersed in it. And I mean, me myself in my classes, the textbook for the class I had to use, it's an online textbook now.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting how nowadays you have that option now. It's either the hardcover or you get it on Kindle or stuff like that. But I'm glad to hear that you match, as a lot what of our previous guests have said about what they love about libraries, loving books and all that good stuff. I'm glad to hear that, Dr. Stein. So with this in mind, what does our library mean to you?
I wish that our students enjoyed our library as much as I do. I love that we have the children's section. I teach children's lit, and I just think looking at the books that we start children out with is just so fun. While it's not a traditional part of the library, I love that Lobo Den is in the library because it forces our students to actually go to the library and maybe think about what's possible. I love the fact that beyond the books, we also have the DVD collection, understanding that communication is so much more than just the written word these days. It comes in a variety of forms. I mean, I love the cartoons y'all have at the front on the rolling board throughout the semester. I just think they're so clever and helpful. I love the fact that our library is so many different things. It's got the computer lab, it has the archives, it has, or at least it had the gaming room. I don't know if we still have it or not, but that there's just so many different aspects to it, and that it's beyond the and become a much more open space, integral to all aspects of one's lives. And the other thing I love about our library is going in and seeing people from the community there using it. I just think it's a valuable resource that we don't honor enough, because if everything else on this campus disappears, we could still go to the library and get so much of our work done here in terms of teaching, in terms of learning, in terms of researching. It's all possible here in the library.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think that's what's great about our library. It's into like this Swiss Army knife for the students, because like you said, now we have Lobo down there. So they go there to register for classes, to talk with the tutors there. And they know like, oh, well, I'm already here. I can print out my homework assignments, or I can try looking for that book I need for that one class. Or, hey, I can even check out the archives I need be. So, yeah, I think that's also what I agree with you, that I appreciate about our libraries, that it's almost like the hub for everything
Right.
that Sul Ross has to offer.
Right.
Because it also becomes a gateway to the rest of Sul Ross, because
Right.
you go to the library, you go to the archives, and then they're like, well, if you want to know more, we got the museum.
Yeah.
Or you can check out the science building or any
Right.
of the other buildings that correlate to what you want to do.
It links all across the campus.
Exactly. It serves as a great link for our students,
Yeah.
because not only, like you said, do they get to go to Loboden for their classes, for their tutors, but once they see what classes they're going to take, they're already at the library. So they can already immediately jump into, oh, I'm going to get a head start on
Yeah.
what I'm going to look into. And as for the game room, yeah, we used to have it. Unfortunately, we could never find a good place for it.
Yeah.
It was always kind of hidden in the back, tucked away. So instead, we decided to give what materials we had for the game room to campus activities.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so the game room they have over at the UC has a lot of the things that we used to have now.
Nice.
So now people know that they can go there for a lot of the stuff we used to have. Because, I mean, what was great about the game room, too, is that certain professors would actually send their students there, specifically for, like, computer science
Right,
or
right.
video game projects. They knew, oh, well, the library has these games. I want you guys to do this for your homework, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, again, it adds to what you said, that connecting hub of
Right.
everything. And I'm glad that you, as much as everybody else can see it, sees it as that.
Right.
Because, like you said, it's not just for our students or faculty and staff. The community also shows up.
Yes.
The community borrowers show up. They become part of the Sul Ross family, so
Right.
to speak. So I'm glad that you also appreciate that fact about our library. So we know what libraries mean to you. We know what our library means to you. What's your history with libraries, though?
Okay, so I've been saying this a lot, and I should probably stop, but I'm old. And because I'm old, when I was in elementary school in Texas, libraries weren't available in all elementary schools. And I lived in a poorer part of town that, my apologies,
That's okay.
in a poorer part of town where we did not have a library in our school, and by virtue of the hours that my mother worked, it wasn't like she could take us to the library to check out books. I didn't realize that outside of our textbooks, I really didn't realize that other books existed for a long time. And then when I was in 5th grade at this particular school, the teacher kept me after class one day, and she said she had a bookcase, a locked bookcase that had a glass covered with glass doors on it, and she unlocked it, and she said, "Would you like to take one of these books home to read?" Wow. Wow. She just had this whole variety of different books that it was just incredible that. So to me, that was a library at the very beginning, and it opened up all these other worlds that I didn't have access to by virtue of the fact that, we just didn't have any money. We didn't go anywhere. And Mom worked so many hours. And I remember then when I went to middle school, and they had an actual big room filled with books. And I would be allowed to check out, up to 6 books at a time. And I did. And I would be reading from them all at the same time. And I would carry them around with me. And the teachers would go, "Well, why are you carrying all these books? Just carry the one you're reading." And I'd go, "Well, I'm reading all of them." And which was kind of silly, but it was like I was scared they'd disappear or something.
Yeah.
But that was just a whole revelation about a world outside of where I was living and of ways of looking at the world that I had just never seen. And it was enthralling to realize that all of this was available and out there. And so that's what libraries did for me. They just took what was a very encapsulated lifestyle just because it seemed like there were so few opportunities, and made me realize that there was so much more out there that I had not realized until I started reading and seeing all of these books. And you have textbooks in class and you realize there's a bigger world, but when you start reading of other people's lives and science fiction, other worlds, maybe pretend, but what a fascinating way of looking at life through science fiction. So it was just really a great opportunity for me to realize they just opened up the world for me in a way that I had not had it opened up until that point.
Mm-hmm. So then, now that libraries have become more available, what are some of the biggest changes you've personally seen from going to that glass bookcase to just libraries in general now?
Well, mainly the technological aspect. I mean, it used to, I remember the card catalogs.
Yeah.
And and I just find it really interesting that there's so much, so that our library, I think, is effective because it's not just books anymore. I think any library that is solely books is missing the mark these days. And I think that libraries are also so available now through computer. I mean, that's what I've seen the biggest change in. I bring my classes to the library for an introduction on how to do research. And, so much of what, especially at a rural institution like ours and a smaller institution like ours where we have less money for research materials, those databases are invaluable because they make it possible to do research in a way that if we were only able to offer them the paper journals that we would not have access to. So that, to me, is the biggest change, is that part of the library that is beyond the four walls now, which is good. I mean, it makes it possible for us to have the benefits of the bigger libraries that are out there in the world, the materials that are available for research in a way that I'm not quite sure how people managed it. I guess it was interlibrary loan. I can't imagine doing graduate research at a smaller library when you know that other things might be available, or maybe you just wouldn't know they were available because pre-technology or pre-computers and Googling and all that sort of stuff, however you'd know, pre-databases. So I think that that's been the biggest change. I also think that's taken away some of the joy of the actual book, of just being able to turn those pages, because it's not nearly as fun to scroll down. I mean, I just, I've only been scrolling for the past 20 years. I can imagine those of you who will have grown up scrolling. My 4-year-old granddaughter knows how to scroll. So I can't imagine where carpal tunnel syndrome is going to be as a issue by the time all of you guys are hitting my age.
That's very true. No, and you're right. It's very hard to think nowadays of a library without some sort of technological aspect in it. I mean, even back when they started introducing microfilm machines, that was already a technological aspect in the library. So, I remember watching movies where they would show off the libraries, and I'd say, I need to find this book, and the librarian would be like, here's your card catalog for it. Flip through it. If you find the card you're looking for, now you got to go rifle through it. And nowadays, you just look up the title, and there it is. The number's right there. Yeah. Write down the number. There you go. Simple as that. So, it's interesting to hear that technology, even today, is still making that impact. It still has made that impact, especially on libraries now, making a lot of things more readily available for students. Because, I agree with you. I can't think of, how difficult research must have been when you needed something that was not available at your library.
Right.
I'm sure that maybe people have made more use of the yellow pages, or just having to ask someone who knew that person, so they could get back to you and tell you, yes, I have that book, or no, you're going to have to ask the person who knows that person. So it just have removed so many middlemen now. Yeah,
and made it possible for places like Sul Ross to thrive. And not be a barrier, for that not to be a barrier for our students as they're doing research, and that's nice. That is nice. But again, one of the things that I do wonder about is people missing out on the power of holding paper in their hands. I think that, to me, that will be a sad thing. But then, I had a grandmother who just despaired of the fact that none of her grandchildren knew how to start a coal fire.
Really?
A stove. She was just scared to death that the electricity would go out one day, and we would all freeze to death because we wouldn't know how to start a coal fire in a stove. And, I would tell her, well, Grandma, one, none of us have a coal-burning stove, and two, I wouldn't know where to find coal right now that I could put into it. So I'm going to freeze to death anyway, if that's the case, if I can't put on enough blankets. So, maybe my love affair with the paper book is just indicative of where I'm at age-wise. And like for my granddaughters, it won't be something that they're even cognizant of in the same way that I look at a coal-burning stove and I think, well, could I use that in the corner to put a flower pot on? But I never think of it in terms of its initial function.
Yeah.
I only look at it now in terms of form. So, maybe that's where many of our books are going. When Kindle first came out, when the electronic books were first coming out, I was going, oh, it's a fad. We're going to stick with books. They're not going to disappear. And now I can really see them becoming, antiques in lots of ways for lots of people. Especially, once, my generation and people who have grown up with books, when they've had the opportunity to be viewing everything online, I think it'll be a totally different experience for them, and that they won't necessarily see the value that I have in holding a book in the same way. So I think the definition of book is definitely going to change as time goes by.
And I mean, funny enough, I was having this type of conversation with a friend of mine, how you look at a VHS, and a lot of students, we've heard them ask, well, what is that? Yeah. Or they ask, where's the movie in this? And you're like, well, it's in there. It's a lot different. And again, it's like thinking, oh, well, CDs, DVDs, they're a fad. They're gonna pass. We're gonna keep using VHS. And it's like, no. I think that's one of the very interesting aspects of technology, is that every generation is always going to go through that thought, like, oh, that's just a fad. It's gonna pass. We're still gonna use this. And it's like, no, it's shifted now. Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine the shift that people must have experienced with horse-drawn carriages to the locomotive. Right. And then from that to the first cars, and thinking cars aren't going to make it. Right. I'm going to keep using my horse. And it's no, look at us now. And even then we're now moving to possible cars that don't need us to be driving them. They'll drive us. Yeah. So I think it's great that the way technology evolves, it's just limited to like how it's been evolving with the library, but with everything else. Right. So I find that point of view interesting, and it's
well, because at first, you could find hay for your horse. You couldn't. There weren't gas stations. Yeah. But then now there's gas stations, and there aren't hay stations for horses. So,
exactly.
I mean, just the ability to have a horse-drawn cart would be, it's virtually it would be an anachronism to be riding around. So, as the technology speeds up, it sort of takes away it's not even possible to use some of the former versions of technology, and yet they were state-of-the-art at the time.
Exactly. Like I think of, we have some typewriters in the library, and very rare, but people will ask us to use them. And some people have asked, how do you use the typewriter? And it's this whole thing. It was innovative back then. You no longer had to just rely on pen and paper. Now you could type now, but now we have laptops, desktops, stuff like that.
Can you imagine doing a thesis or a dissertation on a typewriter? I mean,
making one mistake would have frustrated me so much, because I would have to rip out the page and start from scratch. Just thinking about it, I'm like, a lot of people back then had a lot of patience with typewriters for sure. So with all of this in mind, what would you say is one of the coolest, more interesting libraries you've visited?
Well, I'm going to say the UTEP library, University of Texas El Paso. And the reason I say that is doesn't even have anything to do with books, but they, UTEP professors, there were some doing research in Mexico on the Aztec use of pigments in the pyramids. And they had come up with the formula, especially for some of the reds and blues. And so they had authorized the use of the colors that they had discovered on how to recreate them in the 20th century at the time. And then they were using that for decoration, for painting in the public areas of the library. And so it was this sort of, if you knew this, it was sort of this archaeological flashback to the time of the Aztecs in terms of these beautifully hued colors that when we look at what's left of the pyramids now, down south, we don't have the benefit of the colors that they were painted. And so that to me was just fascinating, that all these to bring history into the library when the library is a treasure trove of historical information, but to see it in a non-book form, I just thought that was a great use of another way of bringing history to life. And so I always thought that was just a really neat aspect of a library to be teaching in another way than from just a book.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that about UTEP's library, actually. I think it's great. That's a fantastic way to decorate.
Yeah.
Like
it honors your researchers.
Yeah.
It honors the past. It provides a different, we tend to, again, going back to the library and going back to, the uniform way of presenting books and bookshelves and all that. And it's really just a beautiful place to just wander through. And I found that I always find that fascinating when I think of that library.
Yeah, no, I think that's great too, because it shows the students a practice that was taken from various accounts and books, and they put it into practice, and they showed it off.
All right.
Like, look, this is what they used to do. We learned from this, from our own studies, from books we probably ran into in the library as well.
Yeah.
I think it's a great way to show it off in that library.
Fascinating.
Oh, I got to check that out one time for sure.
Yeah.
Like that sounds fantastic. So now then, with this in mind, if you could build your own library, what would it look like, Dr. Stein?
Well, mine has all of these oak shelves in it, dark oak. There are huge overstuffed recliners that rock. There is not a Starbucks, because I'm not a Starbucks fan, but there is easily accessible great coffee with creamer and pastries, because I enjoy my sweets, and then there's a candy bar. One of the shelves of the bookshelves is a candy bar, because there's nothing like a good cup of coffee and some forms of sugar as you are reading. Great lighting, but I don't want it external lighting. I don't want a whole lot of sunshine coming in. My library is a dark place. My husband's going to call it my cave, that has all of these wonderful mood lighting, and then specific lighting that I can turn on a lamp and it brings the lighting straight down to the page that I'm on. That is my dream library. And maybe a fireplace, with it being cold enough to use the fireplace.
Well,
but that's optional.
It's very, very comfortable. One of those very relaxing library. I feel like most of the time I'd end up falling asleep just because of how comfortable and enjoyable that entire setting is.
Yeah, well, I find that for me literally I can't think of the last day when I didn't read something during the day. Even if it's only a few pages, I read every day, because that's how I de-stress. That's how I calm things down. That's how I declutter my brain before I'm getting ready to go to bed. Every day. I have books all over the house, and my husband, this is one of the ways in which I know he loves me. We have walls of bookshelves in our home, because he honors the fact that I love books, and the books that I know I'm going to want to read again. We get a hardback copy so that I can go in my library. And this is a man who doesn't take joy from reading. Reading is something that one does when one has to do it. And so the fact that he supports my love of books and is willing to have space in our home for my books. And whenever we move, he'll go, I'm going to have to pack how many books? And I'm going, I'll help. And he goes, right. Well, I do try to help, but packing books is, packing them isn't a problem, but carrying boxes of books around is heavy work.
Yes.
But the fact that he does it, I think, is adequate proof that the man loves me.
Definitely. I'm glad to hear that your husband, while does not share the passion, appreciates your passion and does what he can to ensure that you can keep pursuing your passion.
Absolutely.
That's fantastic. I'm very glad to hear that. So now that we touched upon your books, what would you say is your favorite book?
I think that when students ask me that, or even like in this case, I always tend to go to Dune by Frank Herbert. I read it, I don't know how many different times I've read it. I try to read it like once every 5 years or so. I know that my reading of it pre 9/11 and the war in Iraq and Afghanistan changed my reading of it in a way that that I found interesting. I just find that it takes so many historical, takes so many historical elements and then puts them into a far future. The role of women in that book, the political issues that come up, the ways in which we treat each other badly, and the way in which we fight to live the lives we want to live. I just find all of those themes to be brought together in a very nice way in Dune and the Dune series. But that's the one that I usually call my favorite book.
Yeah, it's a very interesting book for sure. I personally started reading it a while back. I have to jump back in on it because of classes, but like, it's a fantastic book, fantastic setting, very interesting. It's very hard to not lose yourself when you're in that world created by him. So I can see why it would be one of your favorite books for sure. So what are you reading now, though?
Right now, I am reading Pure Fluff. I am into murder mysteries, mainly by John Sanford, the Prey series, and I'm reading a lot of Kellerman, any of the Kellermans, Faye Kellerman, her husband, I think he's another John, and then their son, and I can't remember his name right off the bat, but they have, between the three of them, they have 3 or 4 different series of books, and I've got them all. There's a bookstore in San Angelo where you can buy hardbacks for $1 of the ones that they have multiple copies of.
Oh, wow.
So I've just got this whole set of hardbacks from John Sanford and from the Kellermans. And then in Ace, on the second floor of Ferguson, we have the honors program has put in a rack and I just take, when I finish reading the books, because I'm probably not going to reread those books. They're not going to go into my permanent library. I just read them just for, decluttering my brain at the end of the day. So when I finish reading those books, I put them there, and then it's a free library.
Yeah.
Take a book, bring a book. If you want to keep it, if you find that you love it, you keep it forever. So when I finish with those books, I put them in the honors program free library, so that hopefully others can find some joy in reading too.
Yeah, I've seen it. Obviously, all the time when I go to teach my class, I always see it there, and I think that's a very interesting, very, very nice concept. Of here, these are books people have read before. You should check them out too, because you'll take it, you read it, and when you come back, there's other books there already.
Yeah.
People have been picking them up. There's something new you can check out, and wow, you have a lot of books you've been reading. Then that's glad to see that. Something you used to do back with your first library or with the bookcase, it's still following with you, reading multiple books at once.
Yeah, that's so true.
So, just a little fun question. From both the places you've worked, what have you preferred, Sul Ross or UTEP?
Sul Ross is, in UTEP's siloed because it's so big. And at Sul Ross, I get to have my finger in so many different pies that at UTEP I wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so while I got, my bachelor's and my master's and my doctorate there, and my son is a graduate of UTEP, and heaven knows my son loves UTEP athletics to this day, and I have a fondness for UTEP and the minors, but Sul Ross is where I think I really feel like I've made a difference, and where I've been allowed to do so many different things between honors, and like I was faculty in residence in Lobo Village for a long time, and working with tutoring, and then with the DevEd program, and then being an English professor. Faculty assembly, all the things that, being at a smaller school, I've been allowed opportunities to do work that I probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to do if I'd stayed at UTEP. And so while it was, I had many great experiences there, I feel they're more preparatory for the time that I came here to Sul Ross. So I'm going to say Sul Ross.
Sul Ross it is then. Well, I'm glad that Sul Ross has been able to provide you with that, with the ability to, like you said, put your finger in many different pies.
Yeah.
Because it seems that you're someone who really likes to do that. You like to ensure that your knowledge, your expertise is in very different areas where you know you'll be able to help others with it.
It's the hope.
The hope, yeah. I'm glad to hear that Sul Ross has been able to provide that for you. So it's great that Sul Ross has someone like you as a part of their faculty, their staff, and so on and so forth.
That's kind.
So, from the times you've been to our library, what would you say is something very notable about our collection?
Well, the desk, because I just think that's. I've always thought that the desk was a fascinating tradition here at the university. And then when I realized that the journals were being collected from the desk and then taken to the archives, I just think that that's a fascinating tradition.
Yeah.
And it's, maybe not the most research intensive in terms of traditions at an institution, but I think it's something that is a way to get the attention of our students.
Definitely.
In a way that can help engage them in terms of this isn't just the place of stereotype, but that it's it's an organic, dynamic place to come into, and there's more than, the books themselves have an appeal, but there's more than just the books when you come to the library. And I think that having the desk in the outer lobby, at the outer atrium area, is a really nice draw, and just a way of saying that, one, the library is part of this institution, and two, this institution has a long and storied history, and engage, find out what it is, be a part of it.
No, you're absolutely right. I remember hearing the stories about the desk. When I first went to the library, I saw the desk, and I read up a little bit on it. I remember thinking, no way someone actually took this desk up all the way up there. Sure enough, that desk's there. There's a new desk up there, and I just found that tradition very interesting. I took part of that tradition. I'm glad I did. It was a great hike, great view.
Nearly killed me when I went, but we went on a 105-degree day. I learned my lesson.
Now you know, everyone, you have to be prepared when you make that trip. Well, Dr. Stein, we have two more questions for you. So first we have, what do you love about Sul Ross?
There's so much, I think, to love about this institution. I love our history. I love the role we play in this region. I love the fact that students can come here from these big, large cities and have this opportunity to be in this smaller place where they can make a difference, and where it's kind of hard to hide. It's not that it's not impossible, but I know my students' names. I see them across campus. I say hello. And that is great, because when I taught at UTEP, teaching was, but I didn't, while I knew my students' names at UTEP, where would I see them? I'd see them in the building that I was teaching in. Walking across campus, there were, just too many students, and very rarely would I see the students that I knew. Here at Sul Ross, I walk across campus, and, students may not appreciate it because you can't hide, right? And, you just weren't in class, were you, on? Well, I wasn't feeling well. Was lunch good? Because he's coming out of the UC. You can just, tease your students like crazy at a place like this, because you can get to know them in a way that just isn't possible at something, isn't as probable as a place like Sul Ross. And I think there's something to be said walking across campus and going, hey, Edwin, how's it going? And the guy next to you is going, your professor knows your name?
Yeah.
Here they do. You don't get to have those opportunities to interact in a way that not only impacts your students, but then also tells the students around them, my faculty know who I am.
Yeah.
And they remember me, and outside of the classroom, they're not scared to talk to me, and maybe I'm not scared to talk to them now.
Exactly.
Those sorts of things. So I love that about Sul Ross.
That was actually my draw when Sul Ross came to my high school to present, and I liked that they said, oh yeah, it's very one-on-one with the professors. They actually know your name because of how small the university is. And I remember thinking, oh great, I won't be just a number to the professors. I won't hear, oh, you have to talk to the teacher's aide.
Yeah.
Talk to to their assistant. And it's like, no, you get to talk to the professor.
Yeah.
I still remember one of the funniest interactions I had was I shared a beer with a professor, not knowing it was a professor until much later. And I was thinking, that can happen here. You can just go to a bar and you'll suddenly run into the professor.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's great. I think it provides a bigger bond between professor and student, knowing that they can approach you in such a casual manner, because you're not seen as this towering deity. You're like, oh, there's just a person who's trying to help me out.
They go to Porter's too.
Yeah, exactly. They go to Porter's too. They go to Stripes. They go everywhere here in Alpine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, to end it off, what do you love about Alpine?
When we leave here after retirement, well, I just love the deer. Well, except for when I hit a deer, when I was coming for midnight breakfast one day to work midnight breakfast, and hit a deer coming around Loop Road and scared me to death. And I guess I don't think it scared the deer to death, but it certainly left him or her with a bruise. But, the deer walking down behind our house, and, the grandkids coming, and, us putting out deer chow so that we can show off the deer to the grandbabies and all. And even just, coming to work and dodging them on the loop road, because they have no concept of the fact that my car is a heck of a lot bigger than they are.
Yeah.
I love that interaction of nature that we have here. I love our Lobo alerts back when they would say, javelina was seen on campus, do not try to pet, Bobcat, don't attempt to pet the bobcat. The fact that is a possibility that might even be thought about. I just find fascinating about here in Alpine is how how much of the natural world is so close to us in a way that we were in El Paso a couple of weeks ago and just driving across town and seeing the layer of smog. I remember a doctor telling me I have asthma, and the doctor saying, Kathy, you got to get out of El Paso. It's going to kill you. Because the ozone, I reacted negatively to the ozone action days that we would have there. Mm-hmm. And here, that's not a problem. No. And, I love the fact that there's, to look up at the night sky and it's not all city lights, it's the stars. I love that about Alpine. I don't love that I have to go so far to see a doctor. I don't love that there's not an HEB. Yeah. But I do love there's just so many little things that are here that aren't elsewhere. Yeah. And so take advantage of them, enjoy them.
No, it's true. I still remember the first time I was walking around the campus at night, and I saw so many deer, and I was thinking, I thought these guys only appeared in forests. Yeah. Or in the desert. What's going on here? And the fact that they were on campus completely blew my mind.
I know. Winter intercession one year, I'm walking between ACR and BAB, and I hear this noise behind me, and suddenly this deer comes running up to my right and brushes my arm as he's running past me. And I'm just going, well, excuse you, deer. But where else does that happen, that you get the bum rush from a deer as you're walking across the campus? It's just, those are the kinds of experiences that you're not going to have when you're, in a really big city. It's just not going to happen. And so those are the memories that you treasure and enjoy and become part of, the lore of what you tell. Plus, I was in an earthquake yesterday. Oh, yeah. I felt my feet moving under me, and I've not had that happen to me anywhere else I have. I was in 2 earthquakes when we lived on Okinawa, but, that was part of the Pacific Rim. You expect earthquakes there. I don't expect them in Alpine,
you don't
Texas.
Expect them here at all. Well, Dr. Stein, that's all I have for you. Do you have any questions for me that you would like to ask?
I don't. I really appreciate the visit. It was nice.
Well, it was great having you. I really appreciate that you accepted being part of the podcast. Great to hear all you had to say about the libraries and yourself as well. Thank you very much.
Glad to be here.
And be sure to check us out next time on the next chapter of The Long Overdue. Thank you very much.